Welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, my name is Brian Jenks, and today we are going to be talking about the RStudio IDE. This is going to be a long and in-depth walkthrough of all of the features in the IDE, not literally every single little granular feature, just a lot of the ones that will be the most useful to you, and a cursory overview of a lot of the functionality that this editor has and how to take advantage of it. If you're the type that likes to jump around, don't worry, there will be comprehensive timestamps in the pinned comment below. This is going to be a long video, so if you only care about certain parts, please feel free to utilize those and go to what interests you or what catches your eye. All right, so if you're ready, let's jump right into RStudio. So the first thing we're going to cover is these top menu bars up here, everything up along this tall top banner. So the first item we have here is making files. I know, very simple. So this little button right here, we can make any of these sample files here. You can open up a bunch of other things in RStudio, but as for just like making a file, you can click this, get your R Markdown, R scripts, notebooks, whatever you want. This is where you can make files with a simple button click. So I already have an R Markdown document open, but I didn't save it, so I'm going to close that. Let's open up some brand new documents. I'm going to open up a brand new R Markdown document. You'll get some options here. And when you open this up in RStudio, you have the option to select a document with PDF, HTML, Word output. You can do presentations if you have these packages and things installed. Sometimes they'll install it for you. Shiny, we're not going to go into that. It's a whole other animal there. And you can have a bunch of templates from different packages you have installed. So I have the Vitae package installed, and there are a bunch of templates that are provided for you. So when you open up an R Markdown document, you can open up any of these different items. We're going to keep it simple, basic HTML output, okay. I am also going to open an R script. This is a blank script file. It's just like if you ever use Python, you open up a blank script and you start typing. This is what that is. It's a blank script file. It will just execute everything when you're running it. So with these files, there is something open like this, which is the document outline. Now, in the interface, and we're going to go over the interfaces in complete detail later, but right here in R Markdown, you can see I have this little option down here, toggleable. This is basically the outline of your document. Markdown is basically HTML, a very simple syntax for HTML, so these two hashes make it a second level H2 header. So with these headers, we can detect the document outline as well as the code chunks, so all that stuff is represented here. But not everything that's in the outline has to be a code chunk or a heading. I don't really like this one here at the bottom. I really don't like looking at it. One thing I really like is the one right here, this little button. This opens up the document outline. Now with this, we have the names of the different code chunks. You can see I have a code chunk name here. In R Markdown, you can mix your code with your text, kind of like a Jupyter notebook, but it's all in one place and it's not in separate cells. But we differentiate these code chunks with these 3 backticks, and then in the top, the curly braces indicate what language. And with R, you can also, well, and a couple of the others, but we can also set up different options. So in this case, the first thing after a space is the name of the code chunk. So setup, this one is called cars, this one is called pressure. And then after that name with a comma is the options we can give to that code chunk. So if I put a comma here, control space, oh, it already came up. We have all of these different code options. Don't give yourself a headache with them. You don't really need too many of them. It's not going to be something that you really need to worry about, but you can look into what these options can do. Say you want to set an option for every code chunk in the entire file. This little thing that is right here in the beginning of a new R Markdown document, your setup one, the opts chunk. This is basically setting your global options for every chunk. So in here, you could just do a comma separated list of every single option you want, and if I said echo equals false, then that means that none of the code output for any of the code chunks is displayed. So it's basically, this is your global option for code chunks if you want to change stuff. But in any case, your document outline contains your title headings and your code chunk names if you have them. If you do not have a code chunk name, it displays as chunk number, and it will just count up whatever chunk it is. So you can see it as chunk 2, not 1, because setup is chunk 1. So it really just gives it the actual number of chunk that it is in the outline. But with the outline, let's say we actually wanted to include some text that's not a heading. So with the code chunks, what we can do is we can actually leave a comment. So with a hash symbol in the code area, we could say, put this in the outline. And then if I do 4 dashes, 1, 2, 3, 4, it'll actually put that line in your outline. So in this case, we can actually annotate, and you can see it's a sub-level of cars. We can actually annotate different sections of our code with further parts in the outline. This way it's easier to break up large code chunks in your document outline. I'm not 100% sure you can do this with the HTML comments. I think you might be able to. This is HTML. And then if we did 1, 2, 3, 4, no. So I don't think that one will do that. No, it will not. So at least with that, we can do code chunk outline additions. So this way you can keep a better handle on your document. So that's an R Markdown document. Now with the R scripts, because this is basically the code chunk environment, so you can think of just these code chunks as part of a single R script document embedded in R Markdown, we could do the same thing. So I could say, here's code, but then I can have the comment, outline, and then 4 dashes, and it will actually add it to your R script as well. So you can take advantage of this little trick in both R Markdown and R scripts, and maybe even the other documents with their different types of headings, but I haven't messed with those too much. But in any case, this is going to be like where it's probably going to help you the most. So again, on R Markdown, because this is again one of the pivotal tools that we use in R analysis, you also get this front matter right here. This is YAML. And you can think of YAML as colon separated values. It's like JSON if you're used to JavaScript. It's like JSON without the braces. But with this, indentation actually matters. So if I had a parameter, so I could say param, and then as a sub option, if I want to have a bunch of different parameters, what I can do is I can say date is a parameter, and then I also have year as a parameter. So you can see how I had to indent this. Indentation with params or with YAML actually matter. But in this case, you could also give data an array. So with YAML, you can also do an array and then say test2, test3. And in this case, you can actually do a variety of different things with this metadata, because this front matter is basically metadata for your document for different packages and functions that will manipulate and render your document. YAML is a very, very important part of R Markdown. There's not, I haven't found a lot of really great documentation for it. I'm sure it's out there. I haven't looked very hard, but YAML is a very, very, very useful tool. It does pay to know it, and it is a very simple syntax. So do spend some time, learn about YAML, because it's going to really help you out doing some really cool stuff with your document. You can check out my params video for R Markdown. I'll put that somewhere maybe. Next for R Markdown, we also have, as I said, this setup chunk. Really, the only thing you need to put here is this knitr ops chunk. This is setting your global options for every code chunk in the document. It's not included, so you won't see this in your output at all. And then it will basically set, in this case, the only global option set is that every code chunk will echo its output. So that's why it's true. You could set all of your other options in here, but also with this setup chunk, what you can do is just do all of your package loading. So in this case, that's typically what I do, is if I'm loading any libraries for use in my document, I will just put them in the setup chunk, because the setup chunk loads every time you run a particular code chunk. It'll run setup first and then that code chunk. So in that case, if I want to ever load anything, I just have it always loaded every time a code chunk executes, so I have everything at my disposal. Useful tip. So the next button right here is create a project. Now there's also something over here about projects, and I'll get to that in a second. But with create a project, it was trying to open something here. So, okay. So to create a project, it'll first ask you, do you want to put this in a brand new working directory? Do you want to take over an existing directory and put a project file in there? And do we want to check out a project from a version control repository? I typically do not do this. You can integrate this with Git, no problem. And with an existing directory, you can take a current directory, one that exists, and then put a project file in there and now make that an R project. The significance of projects is basically a single file, .rproj, rproj. The R project files basically make your document or your directory a single encapsulated unit of our code or a work or analysis. You can think of projects as a way of conceptualizing a whole analysis, a unit of something. So when you have an R project file, that makes that document or the directory it's in the root of your project. So if you do any sort of manipulation with file paths in your project file is in the root directory of that project. So you can basically always refer to that as the root. It's a really great way of anchoring your analysis to that specific directory. Now, the best, probably the most robust approach to analysis is doing a package-based analysis. That's not something I'm going to get into here too much, but projects are very useful for just getting something done, but still having some of those really cool and robust options. We can start a brand new one in a new directory, and if you do a brand new project, it'll give you a bunch of options for these projects. Again, way out of the scope for this this particular video, but lots of options. You know, book down books, a new basic project, a package, a shiny web app, a lot of options that you have available to you. So what does that other button do? So with R projects, when you're actually working with a project and you open up an R project, you all just have to double click that R proj file and it opens up the entire project in RStudio. Everything the way you left it, or all of your stuff, it's all there using R projects. So with this option over here, you can see our project is none. We're not in a project right now. But I can also open up older projects. In my most recently opened ones, I can open those. You can start a project in a new session, open a project, or you can clear this list of all of your frequently used ones. Really great for just jumping around between projects or opening up something that you've used before or that you commonly use. Really great. The next button is opening a file in our current working directory, but also in our File Explorer. So if I open recent files like this, it'll actually open up to my current working directory and say, here's all your files. I can open up a file with my File Explorer. Really useful. I'm going to open up this Python file, and it will open up in RStudio. Has syntax highlighting. That's neat. But also, instead of actually having to go through this interface, files in here, and dealing with this, I don't really like dealing with my files this way. So opening up a file like that with the actual File Explorer, really useful. But if you're going to stay within a project-based analysis, package-based analysis, you're basically working in the same directory. So all of your stuff is right here for you. So in that case, this actually becomes also very useful. But if you need to go hunt something down real quick and just open it up, you can easily use that to get into your File Explorer and open up that document. Next, the save all, and print buttons do probably exactly what you think they do. Next, we also have manipulating a bunch of open files. So you can see in the interface here, we have a bunch of open files from all over the place. There's a couple different buttons and things that we can do to interact with this. Now this little double chevron here, we can do that and we can easily open up an interface to see, oh, these are all my open files. I can easily jump to any particular one of these at will. That's really useful. With the back buttons here, we can easily traverse which of these files. So I'm on Untitled 1, and then this is just going to go back through which file I had open. So it's not going to go incrementally. It's just going to go back to which one I had open last. And then one thing that we also have is this go-to-file/function. If you have a function, it'll search for it. So let me see if I can find opt. It's going to find ops chunks. Probably not. But in any case, I don't really use this. But one thing you can use it for is opening up files. So if you see a file that's not visible here and you have a lot of them open, say too many to even search through this, you just want to quickly go to it, I can just do or in this case, outline. It'll take me to that file, or I can go to code there, and you can search for the files that you have open, and it will actually select that item for you and bring it to focus. But with the double chevrons, you can easily jump to whichever document you want to look at. Really useful for quickly jumping to your files. And a really also useful thing is if you have a file here and you want to open it in a separate window, this is something that not many people who use RStudio even know about. It's a really useful feature. If I drag this window and pull it out of RStudio, I'm going to pull it to my second screen first, it will actually open that in another window. And I have one open on another screen. So I have basically two external code windows and RStudio open. So in this case, you can easily set up different code windows on different screens and have a multi-monitor setup for RStudio. You don't have to stay just in the editor itself. This is a really useful feature that I love to take advantage of. And if you want to dock those files back again, you can just grab the tab, just like on your browser, and plop it back into RStudio, and it will be there right where you want it. Simple as that. Next button is the panes. With this, I don't really use this button too much. When I do pane manipulation, I usually do it once I install RStudio, and then I'm usually set up. But you can really, the thing I think is most useful here is pane layout. So in this case, you could easily manipulate which panes you want to mess with. This menu opens up from tools and global options. So that's a lot to click through. If you want to just quickly manipulate your panes or get to this menu, that's a great little place to go. And I'll cover panes later, but that's how you would go to get to that area. And then finally, we're going to get to add-ins. So add-ins. Add-ins are added when you import new libraries or you download packages and they have add-ins created. So you can see I have several different things here: YAML this, TodoR, lintar, DevTools, like all these different packages. When I install them, add their add-ins to this list. You could also search for them. So if I can give it focus, to do, and it will find those different items in my add-ins list. A lot of really great things in R packages are add-ins. So depending on whatever packages you use, really great stuff can come from these add-ins that are usually made with Shiny and other things. So this is where you're going to access those. Or you could just call the add-in functions, but why would you do that? They're all right here, but you can also call them from the code. So that's these like main buttons in the interface. We're going to get to the panes and all the stuff on those right after this section. But next we're going to cover these top items here in the menus. Now this looks interesting because it's on Mac, but on Windows they're probably pretty much the same, and Linux, same thing. It's just these menus and what we care about them. And to be quite honest, almost none of this was really interesting for like this video of what you actually use. I use next to none of these things. Like clicking in here, I either use hotkeys or I use things that are actually in the interface. But as for what I would actually use from this interface, it actually starts right here at Profile. There's a whole talk about profiling and improving the speed and efficiency of your R code because R is single-threaded. Now, I will link that talk somewhere. I'll try and get you that resource, but profiling is incredibly useful. So to do profiling, you can easily just say, I have the item here. Let me grab the code. So if I'm going to test the profviz package, you need to have profviz installed. So to test the profile, I'm going to assign this many items with the rnorm function, and I'm going to add them all up as a sum. So I'm going to see how resource intensive is it to run this code. I'm going to profile it. So if you're going to run a whole document or a specific code chunk at a time, you can start profiling, run your code, then click stop profiling, and then see your results. Or you could just select everything that you want to have run and then click profile selected lines. I'm going to do that. It's going to run that code. It's taking a bit, and then it's going to stop profiling after it has finished executing and then pop up with this window, which there's not a lot on here because it's not a super complex formula, but here's the only item is like how long it took to run, which was 50 milliseconds, and the call stack depth was 1. So there's only like one function nested there. So really, this is a really useful tool if you have a large complex analysis, many function calls, lots of operations, and you want to make it faster or more efficient, or it's really like inefficient. You can use profiling. You could also open this up in an additional window in your browser or an external window. I think that's this one right here. And you can open this up in an external window on a different monitor and profile your code that way. Really, really useful. If you're a serious dev and you're trying to make your code efficient, profiling is a necessity. Next, and probably last, is the most meaty option of these menus, which is really global options right here under tools. This is really useful. And what we're actually going to start before, there's a couple that are also really useful. Global options has the most, but what we're going to cover first is install packages. Typically, if you know the package, you can just type in the console, install dot, packages there, okay, single quotes, package name, enter, and you're installing that package. But if you don't know the name or the spelling, or you're just trying to find it and you want a nicer interface, what you can do is you can install packages from tools, and it will actually open up this GUI interface, Shiny-based interface. You can pick what, if you want to either install it directly from the CRAN mirror or a specific package. So if you install or download the tarball directly to your file system, you can import that way. You can also do multiple packages. So typically, if you did install packages, you could do install packages, and then in there, if you want to install multiple at the same time, you can do C for concat, and then give it a vector of package 1, and then you could do package 2, whatever, and install a vector of different packages, which is something that I do sometimes. And in this, you could also just do that just by separating. So I could do my own package that I made, runes, comma, and then you could say dplyr, D if I could spell. There, dplyr. And it also gives you that interface where you can see a menu of fuzzy finding, basically. So D, there's a bunch of packages that all start with D, and as you start to narrow it down, you start getting different package names. Really useful. And then you can just leave this install to library. You can leave that to the default. If you install dependencies, you kind of need to do that to use the packages. Literally, this is as simple as what package you want to install it. So you've got packages installed. They've been installed for a while, and now you're ready to actually update them. Also in Tools, directly below that is check for package updates. Down below, you also have a pane menu, packages. You have install and updates in here. Again, there's many ways to do the same thing, but really what I'm going to show you here is check for package updates. I really like this because it actually shows you which packages have updates available, the version changes that you have this one installed, this one's available, but also this. So as an R package developer myself, the news is basically your change log. What have you changed in the package? And when you do this menu interface here, you can actually click on news, it'll open it, and you can actually see what has actually changed in that package from the prior version. So in this case, here's version, we have 1.831. So all of this is new stuff in version 3.2 and 3.3 here. So all of this stuff is new, and I can actually look at the changes that have happened to this package before I actually add it to my system. I mean, R and RStudio are open source software, so this actually really opens it up to what's changed, what's on my computer, what am I adding to it, instead of, you could also look at the source code too, because you can go to GitHub or CRAN or wherever these packages are hosted, look at the source code, and now you also have like the changelog to see what people are changing to these packages. So you like to configure your editor as much as I do. So in Tools, we also have the ability to modify and see our key bindings. So I can click Keyboard Shortcuts Help. This will actually pop up a menu of all of the keyboard shortcuts that are currently defined. I'm not sure if this updates when you change them, but in any case, this is a really cool pop-up you can get. I don't really ever use that. I know what I use hotkey-wise. But if you want to change or define new hotkeys, you can modify your keyboard shortcuts here. And you can easily see the scope, what shortcut it is, what the action is, and you can easily change a lot of these different things. So different file-specific ones, editor-specific ones, Workbench, all different kinds of keyboard shortcuts. But before those people who are Vim users start, burning down the city, saying, "Where's my Vim mode?" There's a Vim mode. And we're going to get to this menu in a bit, but in, I believe it's code, key bindings right here. There is a Vim and there's an Emacs mode, but there's also a Vim mode. So you can easily get Vim keys in here and use that, and macros and text motions and all that stuff. All of it's available to you. I've used Vim mode in RStudio almost from day one. Really useful feature. All right, now it's time to go over our global options. There are many. So the first thing, we're going to go through each of these tabs and talk about what's really the most pertinent and useful. In general, we can set our default working directory. I mean, a lot of the stuff you really just leave it exactly as it is defaulted unless you actually have a specific reason to change it. Leaving that, your working directory is your home directory unless you're not in a project. If you're on Windows, this type of directory stuff can get a little bit weird when you're doing file paths in R. When you're on Windows, you have to do like double backslashes to escape your file paths, or you have to do /. It actually will, I think, work that way too. But in any case, your default working directory will be like your documents folder. It's kind of weird, but in any case, you can change that by doing browse. One thing that people always recommend doing is getting rid of R data and not storing your R data. This way, you don't have any artifacts left over when you start a new project, open up the interface, do something new. It's just, you don't save it. Just when you open up your files the next time, you have to run everything again to get your stuff. And it's good to just not save your workplace R data. I don't think I do any of that. No, I don't do any changes here with any of this stuff. So next is code. On code, this is the stuff where I would probably edit the most. Insert spaces for tabs. The only reason I have this here, I just like tabs themselves, but when I was just messing with this video, doing tabs instead of spaces for this actually can make your YAML headers not work if you're doing indenting for your YAML. So in this case, replacing those tabs with spaces makes YAML work just fine, and it doesn't really bother me too much. I do like and prefer tabs over spaces though, so I'm probably going to get people getting their torches and pitchforks for that, but in any case. A lot of this stuff is really just formatting changes, auto-detect indentation, insert matching parens and quotes. I love that feature. Auto-indent code after paste, vertically align arguments in auto-indent. I don't like the continuing comments when inserting a new line. If I wanted to do that, I would just do that, or I bulk select my text and then do Control, or in this case Command-Shift-C to comment out a block of code. Surround selection on text insertion. Okay, Vim key bindings, and you can always modify your shortcuts. One of the most useful shortcuts you'll probably ever use is, let me get out of here real quick, is the assignment hotkey. So if I have a variable x and I'm assigning the value 7 to x, if I hold, in this case I'm on Mac, it's Option, but on Windows it's Alt. But Alt or Option minus will give you the assignment operator. I have a ligature, so it's basically the less than and a minus sign. That is the assignment operator, and you can give it the value of 7. You know, we can run that, and then now x's value of 7. That's assignment. And then also, if you're using pipes or the magrittr package or anything that tidyverse, you use the magrittr pipe, which looks like this. And to do that, you can just do, in Mac, it's Command-Shift-M or Control-Shift-M on Windows, and that will insert a pipe for you all automatically. So I could do, you know, dplyr, filter, you know, the option, and then I can, you know, pipe that with the hotkey into ggplot, whatever. So in that case, the hotkey for the pipe and assignment are probably the two that I use the most and that are incredibly useful. So you can modify shortcuts for that type of stuff in there if you want to. I always save my R scripts before sourcing. That's just how I do things. I don't focus after that. And then Control-Enter, this will run multi-line R statements. So if you're in a, you know, if you have multiple pieces of code in here, and I'm just going to change this so it doesn't run for super long. But if I have multiple lines of code in here, and I just do Control-Enter, it'll run one line. If I have multiple selected and I do Control-Enter, it'll run multiple lines. If I do Control-Shift-Enter, in my case, when I say Control, it's Command that I'm doing. Command-Shift-Enter will run the entire code chunk. Command-Enter will run one, and yeah, so it's basically you can select multiple and do Control-Enter, and it'll actually run all those incrementally. That's really useful if you're just trying to test out blocks and chunks of code. So along with code, we also have, this is one of my favorites, enabling code snippets. This is a very familiar and typical syntax for snippets. I think VS Code is the same. Ultisnips in Vim is pretty similar. Snippets are incredibly useful. They are document specific. So if I'm in an R document or inside of a R code chunk, I have access to these snippets. And inside of an R Markdown document, in the Markdown space, I actually use these snippets. That is very important to know. Just because you have R here and you put snippets in here does not mean in an R Markdown document you can put it anywhere you want. So if you're going to do the lib snippet, so that would put in library with a tab stop with the word package in it. So inside here I could do lib shift tab, and it will place that snippet in the R code chunk area. In the Markdown space, if I did lib and then shift tab, nothing happens. There's no lib snippet defined inside the Markdown space. So a quick overview of the snippet syntax and terminology, because this is very useful. I make prolific use of these, and a lot of people do. You say snippet, the actual trigger word, so what you want to type, and then you could do shift enter or shift tab to actually put in your snippet. Below that, you have indented lines. Everything has to be indented by one tab of all of the code you want to put in. So you can see there's some multi-line code in here. And then you can do the actual name of the function, whatever. Tab stops are done with $signs and braces. So if I do $sign and then braces, and inside I say 2, then I'm going to go first here, then to here by hitting tab after I've inserted my snippet with shift tab. So it'll start off in here, and you saw earlier that just the word package is inserted, and I have a full selection of that word, which means basically this is the placeholder text that I currently have selected inside this inserted code. And then if I start typing, it overwrites everything, and I'm typing in a brand new piece of code. Now, if you don't have anything here, it just puts your cursor there, and it does nothing. It would just be your cursor inside of parens like that. Now, if you do a 0, a $0. Typically what happens is that after you do your code snippets, 0 is where you want your cursor to be when you're done. So let's look at what the changes I've made. I did, first one is here, and then this is second, and you'll see what this looks like in a minute. So this is in the R space, snippets, save, okay. Now inside of an R code chunk, which is an R code space, this also is the R scripts. Now, and I think you can also do that in Sweave documents, which is R embedded into LaTeX documents. But in any case, I'm going to do lib. And then you can see also that snippets pop up in the IntelliSense with a preview of what it is. Also really useful. I can just do Shift Tab. Now, package is highlighted. I'm going to say my package runes. Oh, but see, I did the quotes first, so that didn't work. But runes, okay. Tab takes me to second. Tab. Backspace because we don't need anything. Now 0 was placed above library. If I do tab, it takes me there. 0 is the ending place. In any case, it's actually probably not defined specifically as ending place. I think it's really just order of operations by number, but people typically reserve 0, at least that's what I've seen, as where to end your snippet. But in any case, there's a bunch of predefined ones here. When you install RStudio, you can mess with these as you see fit. I have a bunch, like at the bottom, I have a couple set for dplyr stuff. And Markdown, I have a bunch for like pictures or footnotes, that type of stuff. You can do all different kinds of like file snippets in here, and these are the types of code that are supported for snippets anyways. Now there's a bunch of code engines that you can do with R in R Markdown documents inside. So you could run Bash stuff, you could run Python, SQL, whatever inside these code chunks. But as for snippets, that's what the languages are that are available to you. Next under code is display. This is all checked for me because I actually have a theme in here called RS Codio, which looks best with a lot of this stuff selected. Highlight selected word, line, this is just selecting things, showing line numbers, that's what's on here. I think no, RStudio doesn't have relative line numbers, but margin column, this is really useful. This is a little secret trick that I have. I have my editor really zoomed in so you can't really see it very well. But if I drag this over, you can see this line. That's what it is. This is the 80th character is a line set up there for that column. What that's really useful for is for me, when I'm editing code and I'm outputting to PDF or to a Word document, if your code chunks are longer than 80 characters, they actually get cut off in that output. So if you don't want them to be cut off, you need to mark where your 80th column is and not exceed that limit of characters per line. Otherwise, things will get cut off. I have my white space characters showing because I like it. Indent guides, that's like, I think when you have multiple lines of indents. Blinking cursor lets you know where it is. Syntax highlighting and console output. Highlight function calls. Yeah, so like all this stuff I have checked. I don't really change too much of it, but I check all these options and I put 80 here. That's what I do for display. Now saving, nope, I made no changes there. Except I think I do restore cursor to last position when I open the file. So if you have a large file open, say it's thousands of lines, and you want your cursor to go exactly where you last left it, that's kind of useful. Completion, I don't think I changed anything in here. Use tab for auto completions. If that's not already set, that's what I would set. I love doing autocomplete that way. And I don't think I messed with anything in diagnostics. So that's the code menu. So next we'll go to appearance. This is where you mess with your UI, your theme, your editor, color scheme, the font size, font choice. All of this stuff is set here. I think the best looking theme is modern. The classic one is not really great in my opinion. But with Zoom, well, Zoom is what you think it is. I have that set so that you can see code on my screen better. I have Fira Code is currently the font I have it going on here. That's mostly for the ligatures. You can see that the arrows actually look like arrows. You have different cool little things like that. That's by using a font that actually uses ligatures. Now, if you want ligatures, I think it's an option. I don't remember where it is though. But let's see if we can find it. Ligatures. No. I don't remember where I set it, but I know you can find it. But you actually have to use a ligature font. And in my case, that actually is Fira Code. I think I've used JetBrains Mono before, if I have that installed. I don't think I do on this machine. But as long as you have a font with ligatures, you can actually take advantage of that. Font size, that's what you think. And this is where all your themes are. So you have a bunch of them by default, but you can also add them. You can add them by just saying, hey, where's the theme you're going to add? And it's a simple, I think it's like a CSS file, but you can add a theme that way. But there are also packages to install themes. There's one really great one that I'm using right now called RSCodio. I've been working on one for Grovebox theme. It's not really great because it's not finished yet and there's some issues. But I'm working on this Grovebox theme for RStudio. So that's where you would change your theme, is inside the appearance menu. So let me change that back there. Apply. So next is pane layout. We saw this earlier and when we were messing with the button. Now pane layout, this is where I do my initial organize everything. I do this once when I first install RStudio, and then after that I don't really do much of anything with it. It's really just where I leave it. I set it up once and I forget it. So where do I put things and why do I put them there? I like having my actual document in the top left. I like having my terminal or console, all that stuff in the bottom right. Underneath my source document, I usually like to have the full half of the screen filled up with it. So things that I don't typically access, I will put below it and collapse. That is files and packages. So I'm not typically installing a bunch of packages constantly, or messing with my files a lot. I'll have open what I need and then I'll be working in them. And I can always just do this one or use this to open up my file explorer. I don't need to have these really open, but if I want them, they're there. Typically, I will just leave them collapsed so I can look at all of my code and be left alone. Now, with my other panes, I like to have a lot of my meta stuff, this management up here, which is my environment, the R history. I typically ignore R history, but I mean, it's there. Plots, that's if you actually put them in there instead of like an external viewer or a document or inside your code chunk. Again, I don't really use that one too much. Connections, this is actually your database connections. Help, that's what you think. It opens up the documentation vignettes or the help for the functions. Build, that's if you're doing package builds or if you're building a book down book, really useful. VCS is your version control, so you can actually use integrated Git with RStudio. It's a GUI interface. It does, I believe, show diffs. It's really useful if you're not going to use a client I think I use Git Kraken, but you can also do Git from within RStudio. It's really trying to be a one-stop shop for R development and analysis. It's a great editor. I actually really enjoy it. Tutorial is a new one. It's new in the current RStudio release. I never knew about it until I was making this and other videos, but Tutorial is really awesome. You install a package, I think it's Learn R, and you get these tutorials that actually pop up with embedded code executors. So inside this, it's basically a Shiny app, but in here you can actually run this code and you can actually learn R through these tutorials all within the editor. There's a lot of other tools that I've seen like this, like Swirl was a package that was helping you learn R, but within the console. This is awesome. Great addition, and it's all built in. You just click install that package, start your tutorials, and you're off to the races there. You also have the viewer. This is like Plots, but this is where you can see output. Like if you opened a Shiny app or an HTML R Markdown document is knitted, you can knit that to the viewer. I don't like that. I like it opening up in my actual browser or an external window and being larger to view. I don't like that in this pane, but if you didn't set that option, it would actually display here, but you can change that. And then we got a couple others down here. So I covered environment history. I also have terminal and jobs. Actually, I'll cover those in a bit, but with the panes, that's about it. That's what we have for panes. You can see the list is represented here for all of those, and you can easily check which ones you want here. Like I want environment down here, that one unchecks. You can see how you can structure this. So after pane layout, and we'll go over the rest of the panes in a bit, but next we have packages. I don't mess with any of this, but what you can do is you can change your primary CRAN repository. I'm using RStudio, but you can get a list of CRAN mirrors and change which mirror you're actually installing your packages from. You can set others. This is where you might set different other, I wonder if that's Git repositories or not, but in any case, I don't mess with any of this. So next is the R Markdown menu. I don't think I changed anything here, but with this one, you can show in the document outline. Oh, I did, because I think this by default shows only sections or sections and named chunks. Even the anonymous chunks that are not named, I still want to see them in my document outline. And you saw the trick I did earlier with the comments and the dashes to actually input sections of code in your outline. But basically, I want everything in the outline because it helps me maneuver around in my document. show output preview in a window, not a viewer pane. This is what I was talking about, that if you run an HTML document, it will display here in the viewer versus an external window. I want the window. I want it larger. Show an inline toolbar for code chunks. That's when you see like the play button and the gear here and all of this. Those are the options for that. And what that is useful for is this gear will let you say, I don't want to see warnings, I don't want to see messages, and I want to have you do these different things. And you can apply that stuff if you want to, or just get rid of it. But yeah, you can easily change these options in the code chunks. And then with this one is actually running this code chunk, no, it's only running the setup chunk. But in any case, this is actually to run the existing code chunk, which in this case is these 4 sum functions with nested R norms. If I run the green play button, that runs the chunk, and actually will run setup first too. So I actually had to reshoot this clip because this has changed recently. I reinstalled RStudio yesterday, and I got the latest version. What used to happen when you're writing LaTeX math equations in your markdown space is that you would actually see a little pop-up occur above your little cursor of what the equation would look like as you're typing it. This was useful because then you could see, okay, this is what the output's going to look like, and LaTeX math can be very, very complex to write, so it's useful to see what your output looks like. And you could also do that inline, in a pop-up, or never. This doesn't work anymore. So what happens is normally you would expect, like if I'm going to type, I want to see the pi symbol, what I would do is I would do $signs, so I'd be in math mode, \pi, and I would expect to then see a little pop-up that looks like the pi symbol. Apparently what you have to do now is if I hold Command, or in Windows Control Enter, like if you're executing a code chunk or a line of code, next to this, now you get your pop-up. So it's not just, oh, you type and now you see it. Which is useful, I guess, in a way that now it's not like random when it pops up. So if you click away, it goes away, and now you need to start typing again to see it. Now you can actually say, hey, give me that pop-up. And now I can see it, and I can keep typing, and it doesn't go away unless I click. That's actually pretty useful. But also with this is actually for inline math equations. So the single $sign wrap, that would actually be like an inline math equation. To do like a centered math equation, you would actually do double $signs. And what this looks like, let me get rid of some of this junk here. So we have an inline pi, the word test, and then an inline alpha. So this would be the pi symbol, an alpha symbol, and then below that we have a double $sign equation of a fraction of alpha divided by pi, which would look like this. So by doing the whole double $sign equation, LaTeX, I can do Control Enter, execute it, and you actually see this output like this. You can collapse if you want to, or you could just do, backspace through there. But in any case, when running this output, what does this look like? So we can see it's centered here, but when you actually knit this document together, and we'll get to all that later, what knitting means, we can see inline math, pi, test, alpha, and I can actually click on it and highlight it, but also the equations are centered in our HTML output, and it would likely be the same for the other forms of output as well. That is really awesome for inline LaTeX math or previews, and by doing inline preview like this, you'll see your code chunk output that way. If you changed it to, I think it's viewer menu, you would actually see your output in something else. So if we did in a pop-up, I wonder if this would change your code chunk. So if we did that, no, that changes that. So in this case, if we ran this one, there's the pop-up for the equation, no longer inline. But if we did inline, it could actually display the inline that way. Lastly, for this tab, I don't do too much with R notebooks. They're really useful. They're the most similar to like Jupyter notebooks, where you execute certain cells incrementally and not everything is run upon document compilation. If you run R Markdown, every code chunk is executed unless you explicitly tell it no. But with notebooks, it's only going to present an output of everything that you've actually chosen to run. So like in this case, Jupyter cells that you've actually chosen to execute. I don't mess with any of these options, but if you are interested in basically having Jupyter notebooks for R, you can use R in Jupyter, but I prefer all of RStudio's tooling. You can actually use notebooks, and it has some of the same functionality. So Sweave. Sweave documents are really awesome. This is if you were actually just going to write pure LaTeX code, but you wanted to have R or other code chunks immediately embedded in that and then knitted into it. So when you do your final output, you have code chunks directly input into there. This can be done. If you're just going to display code, there are LaTeX packages that can just display code with syntax highlighting, but if you actually want that code executed and have the results outputted, this is where Sweave comes in handy. You would do an RNW file, and you would actually knit that with Sweave, and then you would actually have a LaTeX distribution installed, like XLaTeX or PDF LaTeX. I'm not sure if you can do, oh yeah, you can do TinyText install, or TinyText when compiling. TinyText is like a miniature version of LaTeX of the core stuff. Do you do want a clean auxiliary output? I don't think I used any of this stuff because I don't write Sweave at all. But so I don't think I changed any of this, but you probably would want your auxiliary output cleaned up. But I mean, this is where you change your Sweave options if you actually chose to write them. Spelling is what you think it is. I don't mess with any of this stuff. Ignore uppercase, ignore words with numbers. Yeah, it's your spelling. There's Git, so if you actually want to integrate RStudio with version control, you can use this whole menu. I'm not going to do how to do Git setup in this, but if you're going to set up Git with RStudio, you'll need to do some setup in here and connect your keys with your GitHub or GitLab, whatever you're doing. But you can integrate your Git or version control system with RStudio, and it's a great benefit because then you can just manage it all from one place if you're not going to use an external client like Gitkraken like I do. So publishing. This is if you're going to publish to RStudio Connect. I don't have my account connected in here, but I do have an account. If you want to just quickly host a free Shiny application, you don't care about because it's not going to get a lot of traffic, you just want to put something up there, it is free to publish some stuff onto RStudio Connect. There is some, I think a little bit of stuff you have to do for this, but I mean, ultimately, it's a really great system of getting some stuff out there and just displaying something. So like I have a Shiny app on RStudio Connect. It's nothing fancy. I was just messing around with it, if I'm quite honest. And if I can get in here, you can see I have a little URL I could send people to, and it's just a hosted Shiny app on RStudio Connect. And this is a great tool. This is part of their enterprise option for some of their actually paid services at RStudio. But when it loads it up, it's just this simple, like, Shiny app. Doesn't really do anything important or cool. It's just me saying like, hey, if I create something cool, I can host it up here. People can visit it. It's not built to handle a lot of traffic because it's free. You can see like there's different monitoring of stuff like sleeping, metrics, different, who's actually accessing it. You have all this tooling available to you, and this is all free unless you like want to get a paid option. But really cool to just put up some Shiny apps, send some people to them, and then go about your business. But that is RStudio Connect and publishing. The Connect button is also in here, so you can directly just publish. I don't want to do that, but if you just click that, you can easily just click this button and publish that document to your profile on RStudio Connect, all right within the interface. And again, I'm going to go through the panes in detail later. But that is publishing. Terminal is what you have right here in the bottom right pane along with your console. I didn't change any of this. I am using ZSH on this machine, though I did install Bash for my initial conversion. I do have Bash and ZSH installed, but you can change whatever this is. Your initial directory, I leave it as project directory if it's not already at that. That's really, like, you don't have to change anything of this. It defaults to your shell, and if you're on Windows, I think it might just be command prompt CMD, which is horrible, so hopefully you're using something like git bash, in which case you might change this to bash. However you want to work that. But in any case, this is where you change your shell that is in your terminal tab over here, which is different from the console. And the last of these options tabs is accessibility. RStudio is really great in that they're very conscious of people with disabilities, so a lot of the default color themes for like ggplot are useful for those who have vision impairments. You also have screen readers. You have a bunch of stuff in here to help accentuate accessibility for people who need those services. And there's also other stuff in here. But yeah, if you wanted to mess with the accessibility options, they're also in here. But for the most part, that's really all of the general global options menu. This is most of what you're going to edit is in that menu and in there. Other than clicking buttons in the interface and hotkeys and actually writing code, that's probably the stuff you're going to edit. So now we're actually going to cover the buttons and useful features in the actual panes and interfaces themselves. So the first thing I'm going to start off with is the main interface that you're probably going to be working in, which is the source, or where your source code is. This is the source pane in my top left. And I said earlier like how I have my stuff laid out and how I like it. You can see source is up here, console, files, packages, that type of stuff. So first thing we're going to cover is source. There's a bunch of different buttons in here. Like I said earlier, this one is for traversing which files based on the selection. You also have your buttons right here. These two are on all the panes. These are for minimizing and maximizing, or in this case, opening your pane. So you can drop it down, you can maximize it or whatever. That's what those are useful for. Now, this one right here, I showed you earlier about dragging the files out for having an external display of your source code file, but you also have this button right here. When you click that, you can also have the same feature instead of having to drag it. By clicking it again, you can actually plop it back in. So you can take it out and pop it back in. Save, spell check, that's what you think. Search, you can actually find and replace text. You can do regex. You can do a lot of search and replacement like that in there by using the magnifying glass. Now knit. Knit is for R Markdown, and this is when you actually have a document that you want to knit together using the knitter package in R Markdown. So you can just click knit and it would actually render. If you do the drop down, you also see you can change what it's going to knit to, and that will actually change the YAML in the document, and it'll put this option lower. So if I change it to PDF, it'll put PDF first, and it'll actually knit it to that. It's already knitting to PDF. But then also it puts the PDF option before HTML. So the HTML option's here, but it's actually going to hit the first one, and then it's done. So that's why it does that. And then you can see it also indented too. So if we put that back and change it back to normal YAML, we're good to go. So next we also have knit with parameters. I made a whole separate video on R Markdown parameters, and it's a whole another can of worms. But if you have multiple parameters feeding your report, this is what will give you an option for like your menu. No parameters defined. But if you had parameters and you open that up, it'll actually give you a nice GUI interface to change and manipulate the parameters going into your file upon knitting. Knit directory, you're going to knit to your documents directory or the project directory. So this is useful. When you change your knit directory, it's saying, hey, when I make output for this document, put it where my document currently is, put it in the root of the project directory, which is basically where your rproj file is. I said projects earlier. Rproj file is the root of your project directory. So that would put it into the root of your project directory. And current working directory, same thing. So you could say, hey, change my working directory to something else. The document lives somewhere else, but when I knit the document, put the file where I'm currently working, not where the document currently is. So 3 options. I usually just leave it on document. I don't really have a use case to do anything else. But yeah, clear knitter cache. That's if you're going to do something. I've never used that before. It might be for clearing out parameters, but sure, clear the cache. And then finally, we have this gear on this side. This is just, again, some more options. A lot of this stuff is already available in the global options menu. Output options, expand all output, previews inline. Yeah, this is all stuff that is in the global options menu that we were messing with before. So it's also at your fingertips there, but it's all in the global menu. We also have insert new code chunk. This is like if I went to the bottom of the document, let's get rid of some of this stuff here, and I insert a new code chunk by clicking the button. Oh, what type? So you can insert some defaults. There, you can insert so many other types of code. This is like 7 different languages. The code chunk options for what you can actually insert into R Markdown and execute the engines, there's dozens and dozens of different language engines that are supported for actually executing code within R Markdown. So this is not the limit. This is not what you have available. There is far more available. And what we're going to do is we're going to insert R. There's an R code chunk. Below that, I'm going to insert D3JS. Bam, D3 data equals whatever. It inserts your code chunks for you. If you're just inserting R code chunks, the default hotkey, at least on Mac, is Option Command I. But in Windows, it's Control-Alt-I, and that's for inserting a new code chunk, Option Command I, and there you're already brought to a new code chunk. Now, I had to hunt for this to find it, but this is actually the function that we're going to run to see which options in R there are for knitting engines for different code chunks. So for instance, if I run this code right here, run it, you can see there's a list of over 42 different languages that are supported for execution. Awk, Bash, Scala, ZSH, Stan, Julia, Python, JavaScript, Go, Sass, SCSS, SQL, C. Oh my God, there's so many languages. All kinds of different languages are supported for execution, and we can do a lot of these different different things. Like for instance, I've had code chunks in a single R Markdown document for CSS to actually style the HTML output of my R Markdown knitted document, some JavaScript to do some stuff with jQuery inside that document as well. So that's 2 languages. R code chunks for actually executing R code for analysis. I also had some SQL code. So I actually had the SQL code run against my department's data warehouse database. So I got some data from there, put it into R code, had the output formatted by CSS and JavaScript code chunks. So 4 language chunks in one document, no problem. All right, so after language engines and inserting different code chunks, we have these arrow buttons. What these do might not be absolutely visually apparent right off the bat. So when I click this, you can see I'm moving my document, but how am I moving my document? If I open up the outline, you can see that there's this little green line next to whatever area I'm at in my outline. I can click these and it'll take me to that area in the document. I got headings, I got the code chunks, I got markdown headings, all the stuff is in here. But when I use the arrows, it'll actually take me to these specific headings or items in the document. This is really useful if you want to just quickly jump around, but you don't want to have to have this open, or if you want to have this open and you don't want to click on one specifically, you can just easily traverse through the document. Really easy. So next we also have all these different options for running code chunks. You can run selected lines, the current chunk, next chunk, all the chunks above or below, restart R and clear all this stuff. I don't really use too much of this. I usually just use hotkeys. Clearing all the output, restart it, clear all the output. That's useful because now I don't have that preview there. If you have a bunch of previews, like if you just did a bunch of cells in a Jupyter notebook and you want to just clear everything out, make my interface clean again, really useful to just clear it out. But typically to restart R, I'll just use the hotkey. In my case, for Mac, it's Command-Shift-F10, and I'll restart R that way. And yeah, I already talked about RStudio Connect publishing. We can manage accounts and publish documents directly in here. So if you have an R Markdown document or a Shiny document or whatever you have and you want to publish it directly to RStudio Connect, the button is there and you're good to go. And that's all for the source pane for your actual source code files. All right, so the other major panes I have right here below source code, I personally have it structured this way. You can manipulate this as you want. I have files right here. I already covered about the things right here, so I don't need to cover those. But files, you can make a new folder in your current directory. You can see that my current directory is where it says I'm at right now, which is my YouTube directory, and that's this video. So now we're in RStudio Crash Course. So all this is my working directory now. I can make a new folder here. I can select and delete documents. I can select them and rename them. I can also, I never do any of this, but I can show hidden files, show the folder in a new window. I don't use these set as working directory stuff because you should avoid set WD, all of that. You should always avoid that for reproducibility. You should use the here package. But in any case, those options are there. And then if you make a change, like I knit my document to HTML, but I don't see it in my interface, you might need to click the refresh button here, refresh that, and there you go. You can also click the ellipses here and it'll open up in your file system. That's cool too. But other than that, that's really all you need to know. Clicking on the files opens them, clicking on the folders opens them. The double dots does what you would think it would do in the terminal, but in this case you also have an arrow indicating that it goes up a level. But that's all for files. Packages, this is the same as the GUI interface. Install, it'll pop open the same interface. Update, same interface. You can read the news. You can select all and update all, refresh your packages. But if you click on your packages, the actual names in here, you can see what they say, a little bit of description about them. You can search for them. Search for mine, runes, open it. Okay, it'll actually open up the documentation for that file. I can open the description file or the documentation for the functions. See the examples, really cool. This is part of being an R package developer, is that you have to create all this documentation for your stuff and make sure that the burden is on the developer, not the user. So in any case, you can open up your packages, look at their documentation. If you run the vignette function, I don't have one on mine, but if I did vignette, you can also open one for, say, let's just do something popular, dplyr, and nothing for that. Probably for ggplot though. Let me get ggplot2. If you open up a vignette, I don't know why nothing has a vignette anymore. Oh, I think Patchwork had one. Patchwork. So Patchwork has a vignette. So if you open up vignette, it'll actually see like the HTML, like nicely formatted documentation. The other one is kind of a little bit more plain text, But in any case, this is a really good output for getting information on your functions, on your packages. It's the docs for your packages. Everything's located when you install the package, so you don't have to go out to other sites. I mean, yeah, you're probably still going to go to Stack Overflow or something, but a lot of your initial cursory review for things to understand them is probably going to be the documents that come with your installation of those packages. So searching for them, looking at their docs. If you have a website, you can browse it on CRAN here. You can also see, like, my package is hosted on CRAN. You can go to there, actually visit the page on CRAN. All of that is available for you in the Packages tab. All right, what I have in the top left, let's start off with the first one. I have Environment. Environment is where all of your variables are stored. All of your data, everything that you have in here will be stored there, invisible. So if I have X and I assign X the value of 7, and I run that, get rid of that there. Okay, if I run that, X will be in my environment as a variable that holds the value of 7. Now, this is a global environment. This isn't the function scope, so you need to be aware of that this is the global environment. So if you did something like this, you can see that it has global environment and other packages. I don't mess with any of that, but basically X is now assigned the value of 7 in the global environment and accessible to any function anywhere ever. So we can also load a workspace. I've never used that. Save workspace. I've never used that. This is stuff that, if you want reproducibility, you probably are not doing this. You're probably doing a clean execution every time. If you want to import a data set, you can easily import from text using readr or baseR. readr is probably the better option. But if you have Stata, SAS, or SPSS files or an Excel document, you can easily import those. And this is one of the things that was a killer help when I was first transitioning from being an analyst that primarily works with Excel to R, is import from Excel is a GUI-based tool where you say, hey, find the file. It'll actually give you a tabular preview of your data, and then you can actually change different parts of the variables in the column headers that appear, and you also can name it, pick which sheet, the ranges, max rows, for all this stuff, and it will actually input the code for you, and then you can either input it or you could either copy it. And basically it makes the import process and cleaning process of your Excel documents a breeze. So you can easily transition from Excel to R. A lot of the interfaces have different broom icons. This is kind of a joke I've seen passed around, maybe I think it was on RStats Twitter, is there's a broom here that looks different than the broom up here. These are actually for cleaning your environment. So in this case, the broom here will clean up all of the objects in the environment. You want to get rid of it and include hidden objects, get rid of everything, yes. And then this one will clear the output in the console. Clear it out. Now, this is useful for getting rid of variables if you want to reassign them and then see if their output is different. But if you want a truly clean slate in R, you need to restart the R session, which is what I do before every video now. I make sure to make a point of saying, we're going to start with a brand new session. In my case, Mac, Command, Shift, F10. Restarting R, you'll see that everything is reset. That is a brand new clean session. Now, if I have my item here, and I have, let's say, Y is assigned that, and I run that, cool. If I have list is my default, I usually always leave it on list, but you can have grid to display things as grid here. You can do that. I typically will use list because that way if you have a data frame and you want to see all of the column headers and then a sample of the values, you would do list to see all those options there. And I just prefer the list view, but you can change it to grid just to see some information about those environments and those variables. And then finally, if you change something and for whatever reason it's not automatically refreshing, you can click the refresh button, or it might be set on manual only, not sure why, but you can refresh that with that button there. Next is history. I never really look at this too much, but you can see what was executed last, and we can also send it to the console again. We could input this into the source document. So if I want to go to, get rid of all of this, and I want to say, hey, that code chunk I ran to see all the engines, here's the line, send it to source. Now it's in my source document. It's not in a code chunk, so if I actually insert a code chunk and remove that, go inside and say to source, now I have that code in there, ready for me to use it again, and go. We could also send it to the console, so I can send this to the console, and now I can enter, and it's there for me, ready to go. I haven't really used this too much, but I can see how this could be useful for a lot of people who once they execute the code, but usually I'm executing code that's already in my document, and I send it to the console. So, to each their own. But we also have a broom here. You can clear that, and you can clear your history. We can also remove selected lines from history, save it, load it. I never really mess with this too much, but that is what this can do. And you can also search for prior execution. So if we ran knitr, we could see all the options that all the times we ran knitr. Next, we have plots. This would be if you actually had your plots executing in your code chunks and you did not have them going to an external window or inline, you would actually have that output here. And one cool thing you can do with that though is that once you have a plot visualized, you can export it to either an image or a PDF or copy it to your clipboard. Really useful if you just want to quickly just get something and put it somewhere else, paste it or get it as an external document. You can do that with this. I don't really tend to do that too much. But yeah, you can also clear it out. You can also delete it and get it out of there. Pretty much the standard options and refreshing too. Next is connections. With connections, I don't really have a good way of showing this, but this is basically if you have a connection to like an external database. For instance, I use some of the packages to connect to the data warehouse database that I have at work. And all of those connections, those open or closed database connections would appear here in this interface and show you what you can or have connected to. So this is where you'll find those actual connections. Help is where you actually will find the documentation for like functions packages or different items that are put here by default. This is like the top level menu. But if I did like question mark runes, if I do double question mark runes, it'll find the help, the documentation for, oh, there it is, runes. Okay, go there. Now you're looking at the documentation for my runes package and the runes function in it. So in this case, you can also go through that drop down, find a topic, pop this out, go to home, search, all this stuff to find documents to help you with whatever problem you might be having with whatever package or function you might be using. Tutorial I talked about briefly earlier, really useful. I was surprised about this. This was new to my installation because I downloaded a new version of RStudio. This was in here. Absolutely awesome and amazing. You click install the Learn R package. After a fresh install, you can start a tutorial. It'll open up and load basically a Shiny interface inside of here. You actually can execute code chunks inside this interface, submit answers, like whatever. Like this is actually a really great interface and tool to learning R within RStudio. Again, doing great by making this a one-stop shop for all things R. Viewer is where you would see the output of like your HTML document upon knitting it from an R Markdown document. And if you don't have it going to an external window like I do, and I prefer that, you can have it go to the viewer and it would be inside here and not an external window. But you can also, if it's in the window, you can also use this button right here to pop it out and have it in the external window the way I like it. You can also remove it and clear it out from the viewer. That's all the items I have in my top right pane. Console is basically R's command line. It's not your terminal. It's not your terminal emulator or your shell. This is the R console. It is already running a session of R. So if I hit the broom, it'll actually clear out the output. But if I did runes, my package that I made, my function, I should probably need to load it first. Lib runes. I need to change the snippet. I messed it up. Runes. Okay. Runes. Let's say hello YouTube. Okay, if I run that, nice. Now, if I actually use the broom, it'll clear out the output and it's clean. Awesome. Now, that is an R session. It's already running R. Now, if you want to actually do something with like your file system, you use Vim, you want to quickly do something in the terminal, I do this often, you can click terminal and it will actually open up your terminal emulator. I'm running ZSH, but it actually opens up the default Mac terminal, which is annoying. It doesn't open up iTerm, and I can't figure out how to set iTerm. There's the options from the menu earlier. But you have your terminal here. If I wanted to run R within my terminal within RStudio, you can easily run R that way. Quit. So that way you can easily do that. But this is a way you like if you're just more familiar and happy with the command line like I am, and you just want to quickly do some like file manipulation, do some stuff in a terminal, and you want to stay within RStudio. Right here's a great way to do it. I might want to make a new task for myself. I might run my script. I made a script to do with Task Warrior. I could easily just work with my script that way, and doing stuff in the terminal. It's all right here. It's exactly the same as you would open up externally, just it's embedded. So this way you're easily able to do things that way. The R Markdown tab, this is just the output you'll see when you actually knit a document. You can actually set this to quiet so you don't see output, but you will also see any errors that occur and try and solve those problems. but this is just a lot of output and feedback text for when you actually knit your R Markdown documents. Markers is really awesome. You can see I have a couple tabs here. Diagnostics, I never really get anything from that. I don't really care either. But To Do R, this actually opens up a markers tab. So if I actually had a, let's open up To Do R, and then I actually leave myself a to do. So to do, hello YouTube. And I made a whole video about this package in one of my reviews, but when you run To Do R and actually run that function, so I could say add-ins, find active file, to-dos, it'll actually open up a list of those to-dos in your markers tab, and this is the To Do R markers tab. So if I can go to my document, I can double click this, jump to that item, there you go. But this is what appears in the markers tab. It just marks different parts of your document. So that's really useful. To Do R is really useful. You should check out my package review on it. Really great tool, but markers tab. Next is jobs. Jobs is what happens when you can actually set recurring jobs, or I think it might be basically cron jobs, but you can set up a script and a working directory and run it. I haven't actually never really had a use case to do this, but also what happens this is what happens when you run Shiny instances from your machine. Like when I was running the Learn R tutorial, that was actually this job, is running X data basics right here. That's the job. So when you run a job, this is what appears here in the jobs menu, like when you're running that tutorial. All right, so that's going to conclude my walkthrough of RStudio. I hope you found this helpful. It's a really feature-rich IDE. It's really useful. It's the absolute best place that I've found to do my R analysis and R code. I've done a little bit with stuff in NeoVim with some other plugins and setup. I haven't done things like Emacs Speak Statistics, but I'm going to try that out eventually. I've done a little bit with Jupyter Notebooks in R, but so far RStudio is the best place I've found to do real hardcore R development, especially if you're dealing with package development or building book down books. It's just the tooling and the interfaces and the way everything is optimized in RStudio to make your R code better is just my favorite thing to use. I haven't seen a lot of videos that really cover the editor in depth, so this is what I'm going to provide to you, and I hope that you found this useful. I hope that this makes it around and that people really enjoy seeing how to use a lot of the most commonly used features of RStudio. And if just in case that you needed to know what version I was running when I ran this, I was doing 1.3.1073. So this is a brand new download as of when I post this. It might be a little bit later, but this is brand new as of when I'm filming this. I installed this last night. So I hope you found this useful. If you did, let people know and send it around. But before I go, a quick shout out to my patrons. Thank you, Devin, Alberto, and Klaus for supporting the channel, and I will catch you all in the next one.